Early on in designing the building, we were thinking about all the public spaces, the places that people would walk around, and we wanted it to be eye-catching and memorable and buzzworthy for the people walking in our doors. But our attention soon turned to our staffing areas and where our staff would gather and where the dreams would actually bubble up would be in those staffing places. And oftentimes when you're building a church, the staff is the last people you think about. It's kind of like we'll think about them once we've actually moved in. And I think one of the significant things we did is we actually put staff in the forefront of our minds and said, how do we create a place for our staff where vision and mission is so sticky we can't help but plan and create around it? And so in many of our areas, town centers specifically, where a lot of our staff gathers, we wanted to constantly remind people. So there were some vision talks that we ended up creating to be art pieces on walls. We put our social media wall up there. Our reach as a church is in the millions when it comes to social media. And so we wanted to remind our staff, as you're planning, as you're dreaming, remember, there's an entire wall over there that speaks to who we could be reaching on social media. We wanted to have an outline of our county to remind people these aren't just, random places that we're trying to meet. We wanted you to know there's a family that lives in that home. That's significant. Another art piece that we did was actually do a collection of all the books that we've read as staff, because leaders are learners. And sometimes once you arrive and you're settled, you forget that learning is just as a part of your leadership as anything else. And so we want to remind our people of that. Even our tables, it was a workplace that wasn't just cubicle world. We wanted our tables. The tables definitely represent wood, which represents trees, which represents our logo, obviously. But we wanted those tables to say, this is a long table. It's a place for us to all gather because all are welcomed. Typically in staffs, you see silos, and that's what breaks down staff culture. It breaks down staff communication. So we wanted this town center place to be a place where conversations were always rising up, that this would be the place everyone wanted to have their meeting. Not, I have to go to the office today, but I get to go to the office because where I work makes me think better and it spurs on my creative thought. So that was our goal in creating our staff offices. So when you're designing for a building, it's kind of a daunting task because you have all these creative ideas. Jeff and myself met so many times to think through, how are we going to make this compelling? How are people going to walk in and just be awed by this place? And yet, you have these creative ideas and then the stop comes because you think, how in the world are we going to pull this off? And that's when Aaron really came into play. We had seen Aaron's work through Catalyst and a few other places that he's done work, but when we brought him into the conversation, it was like Jeff and I were both able to take this massive breath and be like, Aaron's here, so he's going to figure it out for us. And what was so helpful for us is not only did he make our dreams reality, which that in of itself was a gift and a miracle because we're sitting there in our two-dimensional world trying to dream up something that he knows how to make 3D, but he was also the best guide for the process. You see, because we're trying to design and be creative and do a new frontier of branding, and yet at the same time, we still have budget money and we still have people giving to this church and we want to be the best steward of them. And what Aaron was able to do was merge our dreams with the reality and the wisdom of knowing this is a church, and so I'm going to do the best job possible and give them a quality product at the same time. And typically you see in church world designers that come in and they say, well, you're going to have to spend all this just to pay for me alone, and then I'm going to do all this other stuff. And what Aaron came in and said, he gave us, we definitely got an incredible quality of product, but he was also able to say, how can I make this the best experience for the church? And left to our own devices, I think Jeff and I would have had a dream book, and that's where it would have stayed. But Aaron was able to make our dreams, take them out of the book and make them reality. He was able to honor the way that people giving this church and yet also making an incredibly excellent product. And that's a really hard thing to find. So to find a designer like Aaron, to work with him, he's a delight to work with, but he also was able to speak the language of designers and yet create something where we still felt heard in our process as well. It was a huge thing for us.